we have responded in Lebanon. Whoever thinks he can hurt us, whoever thinks we will respond by sitting on our hands is making a big mistake. We are prepared for very intense action in the north. One way or another, we will restore security to the north, end quote. Next, on the latest announcements we shared with you yesterday of hostages who are no longer alive and have been killed by Hamas. Following those announcements and intelligence on the hostages, I want to give you the latest update on hostage numbers as of today. So on the 7th of October, 251 people were taken hostage by Hamas. As of today, 124 hostages remain in Gaza, of which 43 hostages are no longer alive, but still being held by Hamas in Gaza. This includes the late Hadar Goldin and the late Oren Shul. 4 abductees have been held captive by Hamas since 2014, including the 2 abductees I just mentioned, and they're no longer alive, Hadar Goldin and Oren Shul, which I just mentioned. Of the 120 people taken hostage by Hamas on October 7th, 103 are male and 17 are female. There are 2 children under the age of 5 years old. That's Ariel and Kfir Bibas. 110 are Israelis, including dual nationals, and 10 are foreign nationals. 8 from Thailand and 1 from Nepal and another from Tanzania. 41 hostages who are no longer alive are being held by Hamas in Gaza, among them 1 from Tanzania and 2 from Thailand. And there remains 1 Israeli who is still missing. Now, to the hostages who have been freed or rescued, there are 131 people. 4 Israelis were released before the hostage release pause in November. 1 was rescued by the IDF. During the hostage release pause in November last year, 81 Israelis and 24 foreign nationals were released. There have been 16 hostages murdered by Hamas, whose bodies have been rescued by the IDF and returned to their family to at least provide some sort of closure and a decent burial here in Israel. 3 hostages were tragically killed mistakenly by the IDF. The now legendary Operation Yad Zahav, a hand of gold in English, the IDF Special Forces rescued Louis Har, who was 71, and Fernando Marman, 61, from Rafah, who were abducted from Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak by Hamas on October 7th. So those are the latest figures. To COGAT now, and an update on their work coordinating aid into Gaza. 263 humanitarian aid trucks went into Gaza in the last 24 hours. Journalists should note the Gazan side of Kerem Shalom is at full capacity, completely full. With what? With the contents of over 1,000 aid trucks. That's a lot of aid. 1,000 aid trucks just waiting to be picked up by UN aid agencies. Perhaps some of you could find out. I'm excited to hear the latest excuses from UNRWA. No matter what they say, though, the UN really does need to get its act together and pick up the aid. The IDF is ready to coordinate its distribution. On the subject of UNRWA, yet another Hamas compound embedded inside an UNRWA facility was found. This time it was UNRWA's Abu al-Hilu school, a school in Burej in central Gaza. Hamas terrorists operated and planned attacks against Israeli civilians and the IDF, but IDF have carefully struck using precise munitions to mitigate any civilian harm in the area. In medical news, the Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza is operational as of Monday, June the 3rd, the day before yesterday. The hospital is open and the reception and emergency departments have resumed operations following its renovation. This is part of the plan, together with international partners, to strengthen the health system in Gaza. So since the beginning of this war, 33,569 trucks have delivered more than 650,000 tons of humanitarian aid. And that's all gone into Gaza. We are continuing to expand our efforts to facilitate humanitarian aid into Gaza. So that's the end of our briefing today. I will now happily take your questions, which you put in the chat box, together with your news outlet. Thank you very much. First question, please.
Thank you. First question from David Clement, the Newsform. Human Rights Watch is accusing the IDF of using white phosphorus on 5 residential buildings in southern Lebanon. Can the Prime Minister's office deny that accusation?
Thank you very much for that question, David. The IDF always and only uses white phosphorus in the legal ways for which it's supposed to be used in warfare, and that is as a smokescreen. It is never used as an offensive weapon, and certainly not one which could harm civilians. So, as usual, this can be added to the long line of false accusations which are made against Israel. They come up in different forms, but on the same theme almost every single day. You can get more information from the IDF, but I can tell you categorically that the IDF, in accordance with international law, only uses white phosphorus as a smokescreen and certainly not as an offensive weapon, which is in accordance with international law. Next question, please.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack, Breitbart News. The Biden administration persists in claiming that the proposal for a ceasefire, which it says is virtually identical to Hamas's proposals, was Israel's idea. Does Israel feel, quote, boxed in, quote, by this strategy, and that it must accept the deal if the U.S. and other parties accept it?
Thank you for that question, Joel. We certainly don't feel boxed in. To answer your question, the IDF's and the Israel's objectives in this war remain unchanged, and that goes through every single one of our objectives to end this war. Just yesterday, the Prime Minister spoke on the phone with French President Emmanuel Macron. The reason I'm telling you this is because it answers your question, I think, comprehensively. The Prime Minister updated him on the details of the outline for the release of hostages. And the Prime Minister emphasized that the outline allows Israel to realize all of the objectives to destroy Hamas militarily and its governing capabilities, to bring home our hostages and ensure that Gaza can never form a threat to us again. So all of our plans allow us to meet those objectives of this war as they've been defined, including, this is very, very important, including the elimination of Hamas. The Prime Minister stressed in that call, and it's very relevant to your question as well, that alongside the release of hostages, this was and remains a fundamental objective of Israel in the war, which it is determined to realize. Next question, please.
Thank you. Second question from Joel Pollack, Breitbart News. President Biden said, quote, don't, end quote, to these countries and organizations that might attack Israel. Iran has launched missiles against Israel, and now Hezbollah has now set the north on fire. Is it safe to conclude that nobody really paid attention to the phrase don't?
Thank you for that question, Joel. That sounds like a question for the White House and President Biden's team. From our point of view, from here in Israel, we remain very, very grateful to the US for standing shoulder to shoulder, side by side in this war against Hamas. We know that Iran is behind all of the attacks we faced. Iran are, of course, Israel's enemy, but they're also the US's enemy as well. They call the US the big Satan. They call Israel the little Satan. So our battle to defeat Hamas here is certainly your battle in the US as well. But as for any other things regarding President Biden, then I guess you should put those questions directly to the White House. Next question, please.
Thank you. Question from Dan Williams, Reuters. Is the reopening of the Indonesian hospital a result of direct Israeli contacts with Indonesia?
Thank you for that question, Dan. Probably the best answer to that question would be to go to COGAT. You're right to point out that Israel does not have relations with Indonesia, but if you want an answer to that question, then you can go to COGAT. I haven't got anything more to add on that.
Second question from Dan Williams. What is Israel's response to the offer by Indonesia's president-elect on Saturday to send peacekeepers to Gaza in the future?
Thank you for that question, Dan. So that's the first I've heard of that proposal. So I wouldn't be able to provide any further information on that. As I said to you, Indonesia doesn't have relations with Israel, formal relations with Israel, so I haven't got anything more to add to that question.
Third question from Dan Williams. Why would Hamas agree to a Gaza deal that would spell its eventual destruction by Israel?
Sounds like a question for Hamas. Dan, as you've probably become tired of hearing me say, this country is determined to realize our objectives to end this war, to bring home our hostages, to ensure that Gaza and Hamas never are able to form a threat to us again, of course, to destroy Hamas. Hamas are an Islamist organization. There is no chance of peace with Hamas. It's only a delay until the next war. Israelis are determined that we cannot fight this battle, this war against Gaza every 18 months to 2 years, together with the fact that Hamas in control of Gaza throw rockets at us, which they smuggle both the manufacturing means and the arms themselves through the border with Egypt. But we've shut off that border from arms smuggling. We ask Egypt to reopen. The aid giving capabilities from that Rafah crossing. They've closed it, and aid has been diverted into Kerem Shalom, which we will happily do. But it would be more convenient if aid went directly from Egypt after being checked and into Gaza. And we want to end this war as quickly as possible. Hamas, we know, although they are encouraged by international organizations and countries which, by means of recognizing a Palestinian state, encourage Hamas in their activity, but militarily, we are closing in on them. The operation in Rafah, the limited operation in Rafah, is extremely successful, both in shutting off those smuggling tunnels by which they've got their arms through, which is a lifeline to Hamas, but also to clearing up those battalions in Rafah, but also in further north in Jabalia as well. So the noose is being tightened around Hamas's neck, and it's a precondition for this war to end that Hamas are no longer in control of any part of Gaza. We want Gaza to be run by Gazans that are not committed to our destruction, and we were looking for partnership with other countries in this neighborhood, in this region, who could be a force for good and lift Gazans up to give them a better future rather than the horrendous last 15 or 20 years which Hamas has given them. It's important to realize that, of course, Hamas are a threat to Israel, but they are a much, much bigger threat to the lives of Gazans. That's a point which is often missed. They have made Gazans' life a misery, an absolute misery. Israel withdrew in 2005, in 2006, excuse me, and that whole all of Gaza could have completely turned around. It's the opportunity for it to be a much more pleasant place, a place where Gazans would have a better future for their children, and also better relations with Israel. But Hamas have turned it into a large terror base whose sole objective is not to look after the people of Gaza, but just to try and kill Jews. Look, it's in their charter to kill Jews. That's what they're about. There's no part of Hamas which is about coexistence or living together or an end to this Middle East conflict. And so that's why there is literally no opportunity for Hamas to remain in power. Next question, please.
Final question from Fred Eager, Interplanetary Television. New York Times journalist Kad Mitz reported on May 30th that OpenAI discovered 5 ChatGPT accounts run by state actors and private companies in Russia, China, Iran, and Israel. Israel's diaspora ministry appeared to have paid Tel Aviv marketing firm $2 million to carry out a campaign using ChatGPT to feed 3 fake social media accounts to spread pro-Israel content. The question is, what is your response? Do you confirm or deny?
Thank you very much for that question, Fred. I saw those reports in the New York Times as well. I haven't got anything to add to them. Needless to say that all countries will have public relations departments where they will seek to give the truth, salient facts about their countries to the outside world and to other governments and to other officials in those governments. It's part of the regular work which all countries do to try and protect and enhance their reputation. The New York Times perhaps makes this out to be some sort of nefarious, something nefarious, but literally every single country in the world has a budget. I'm not speaking about this story in particular, but in general, every single country in the world has a budget to try and enhance the reputation of its country, and Israel is no different in that work. When you visit Israel, as many foreign dignitaries have found, this is an open society. It's a society where it's certainly not a perfect society, but of course, no country is a perfect society. There are fault lines within our society, but on the whole, Israel has done something remarkable. The 10 million people living here, of which 2 million are Israeli Arabs, the majority of those 2 million Arabs are happy to live here. They remain here. They are proud Israeli citizens. Take a walk into any hospital in Israel. You will see Arab doctors, nurses. Go into a dental clinic, you'll see the same thing. Go into any public service provider, you'll see Arab members of Knesset. You'll see Arab Supreme Court judges. Yes, of course, there are faults in every society. No society is perfect, and Israel is no different to that. But this is an open society. It's a democracy. We're very proud of that democracy. It's a democracy which is the only democracy in hundreds of miles in every single direction. And all of us feel here that this country came under threat on October 7th, not as a simple terrorist attack, a one-day terrorist attack, but an attempt at our annihilation. Under the guidance of Iran, this country was attacked and continues to be attacked from Lebanon and from Syria and from Iraq and from Yemen and from the West Bank, where our armed forces just yesterday and today and overnight thwarted more terrorist attacks and arrested more terrorist operatives that are planning further attacks. against us here in Israel. This is the only Jewish state, and this country will be defended. But to make out that any attempt to try and enhance the reputation internationally of this country is some sort of nefarious PR campaign is frankly ridiculous, and is another example of double standards, which are so often standards that are put on this country, but are not applicable to any other country. Are there any other questions?
Yes, there was a final question from Jim Williams. He asked if the CIA director will be meeting with the Prime Minister during his Middle East trip.
Thank you for that question, Jim. I haven't seen whether that is the case, so I can't give you a comprehensive answer, but I would encourage you to keep an eye on the Prime Minister's website, where all of his meetings, forthcoming meetings and past meetings in particular, will be highlighted. And if that meeting is to take place, then that you'll be notified there whether it indeed will take place. On the actual negotiations themselves, that's not something that we can talk about publicly. Lives literally hang in the balance. All of us are determined to bring our hostages home. We know that sustained military pressure together with negotiations is what released all of those hostages. I got them that were released back in November. We want all of our hostages home, and we want this war to end after freeing the hostages, and of course destroying Hamas, making sure they're not a threat to us militarily or in their governing capabilities, and of course making sure that Gaza never again can pose a threat to this country or any other country for that matter. Any other questions?
No further questions. Thank you.
No further questions. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today. We'll be having another briefing tomorrow at the same time. In the meantime, do please stay safe, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.